Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Crossing the Killer Content Chasm, Content Delivery for Successful Portal Implementations. My name is ELLISA, and I'm a portal management consultant here at Habanero. I work with clients to help them implement employee intranets and websites. And as anyone who's ever worked on an implementation project such as that or the sustainment of such a technology, you'll know that content is a key piece to the success of this type of technology. Before we get going, a little bit about Habanero, for those of you that maybe aren't familiar with us. As an organization, we are passionate about helping people in organizations thrive. And we really believe that by creating exceptional customer portals and websites, employee portals and intranets, and member portals and extranets, we can help live that purpose and create great work experiences for individuals. So today's webinar will be about 25 minutes with 5 minutes for questions, hopefully, at the end. Before we get going, I want to let you know that I'm going to be sharing today's webinar in a bit of a story format. So I want you to come along on the journey with me. So here we have an implementation project. We've got a path that we're walking along and we have a finish line at the end. But as with most implementation projects, we'll have some bumps along the road, and in this story, we've got a chasm in the middle. And not just any chasm, but a killer content chasm. These are the things that we typically stumble over in an implementation project when it comes to content. Stumble over and fear, in a way. We've got these killer spikes that make it difficult for us to make sure that we get our content to the delivery line. Our first spike is elusive ownership. So often within an organization, especially when you're implementing an employee portal, the content isn't readily owned by one individual or one group. And figuring out who ultimately owns content for each section or all up owns content can be rather difficult. Next, the number of people involved make this a very difficult challenge. As with elusive ownership and there being maybe multiple owners, there's usually multiple authors and approvers and reviewers, etc. So just corralling all of the individuals and making sure you have the right ones can be challenging. Next is timing. So we're tracking along. The technical build is going great, and we're right on plan. And oh yeah, we also need to create a lot of content to go into this thing that we're creating. We can't have these blank pages and mysterious links everywhere. But how do we actually go about entering content when the solution's not built? It's a little bit of chicken and egg. And lastly, content is foreign usually for those that are tasked with creating it. Unless you have a robust marketing and comms team that will be writing and reviewing everything and are also the subject matter experts, you're going to have people involved in the process where writing isn't a part of their job, writing for the web story isn't a part of their job, and having to write content can be a bit scary. So how is it that we pass these killer spikes and our content chasm? Well, the first thing that we do, Habanero, is we assemble our team. We make sure that we have a business analyst and an information architect on this content team. And these are usually the individuals that are playing these roles on the implementation project as well. So they'll bring with them the knowledge that's required to help the content team move forward with the work that needs to be done. Along with them, the BA and IA will bring the content strategy and an overall vision for the portal. Next, we need to assemble really our team of stakeholders. And this can include subject matter experts, reviewers, approvers, and what we're going to be doing is grooming them into full-blown web content authors. So this content team can range from 2 to 40 people we've seen, and each team size can have its own challenges. But once we've got everyone there, the next step is to rally the troops and make sure that we're prepared to embark on a successful journey through content creation. So next, we build competency. To be successful, there are 3 core competencies that we want to build within the team. The first is information architecture. We want them to be familiar and comfortable with the tools that they're using to organize the content that they're crafting. So the first part of the information architecture toolkit is understanding the sitemap. So the sitemap describes the physical structure and location of information in the portal. A lot of research and thought has usually gone into the creation of this structure, and it's critical that the content team understands how it works and that they buy into it. So we spend extra time explaining details and answering questions to make sure that everyone's clear about what lives where and why. The next thing that we'll focus on is templates and classification. And classification usually is done using metadata. These provide the structural layer that can be separate from the sitemap. So the sitemap is what a lot of people think of as the physical structure, and templates and classification allow us to categorize content in a different dimension. So this can get confusing for a lot of authors because for most people, templates and metadata are abstract, foreign, and even maybe a little bit boring. But having templates and classification allow us to add the details required to make sure that content enriches the experience of using the portal, because it ultimately makes information easier to find. We can explain that templates give your content more structure, improve the presentation, and give information portability so that it can show up in the right places at the right time. We explain that metadata makes filtering and sorting search results a breeze, and it breaks the shackles imposed by the site structure, allowing content to travel more freely when it's needed. And this builds the foundation of the content team's understanding about how information architecture fits into the content creation process. The next thing we'll cover off in the IA competency is semantic markup. So this is getting in a little bit into the background, if you will, of how our web pages look, and teaching authors a little bit about HTML. So I know it sounds scary in that we're having to look at a different language than the one that we're used to using to construct our web pages, but it's not about writing it for content authors. It's really just about helping them understand the actions that they take through usually the rich text editor or the WYSIWYG editor, and what's being done in the background to ensure that the presentation is as they intend. So semantic markup will really improve content presentation, but more importantly, it ensures our content is interpreted correctly by search, social sites, or any other websites that link to us. We want to ensure that individuals are tagging their content appropriately within the HTML so that when our information is being surfaced in another way, it's being done in an intentioned and relevant way. So the content stream is usually running in parallel to the development of the portal so that they have more time to refine and polish content before launch. But how do we do this without a working system to put the content into? We have been using an online tool called Gather Content to help us with this process. So we've had a lot of success in recent projects using this, and what it does is it allows you to create a mirror image of your future portal, complete with a sitemap and structured templates. And it also allows for a hassle-free place to collaborate on content where editors can comment, chat threads can emerge, and a basic workflow process is supported. So you can move a page through draft, reviewed, approved, and migrated to help you track the process of your content creation. So these are our 5 components of the information architecture competency. By developing our team's understanding of sitemaps, templates, classification schemes, semantic markup, and being able to bring it together in a tool like Gather Content earns our content team the IA competency badge. So once we've covered off everything they need to know about information architecture, we move on to the next competency, authoring. So sometimes you have a communications and marketing team available to help create content, and they're usually gifted web writers. But that doesn't usually happen for most implementation teams. We won't have a massive content team just filled with these gifted communicators. We'll have a smattering of individuals, subject matter experts, other business stakeholders, some people from marketing and comms, but other people from all other support departments. So they know that these other individuals know their stuff, but they don't usually know how to write for the web. So we help give them the tools needed to craft great messages and create great web pages. The first thing within the authoring competency that we'll cover is the content style guide. And the content style guide describes how to write for the web and how we want the writing to be created so that it matches the brand, tone, and message of the organization. So the content style guide will usually be reviewed in a workshop. We'll go through it as a group and then talk through examples. And we'll have a physical, or a soft copy document to leave behind so that authors can refer back to it often. The next thing we'll cover off is writing for the web. And some of the things we want to make sure that we discuss with authors around how writing for the web is different is reviewing things like cross-linking, how they can leverage styles and snippets to ensure semantic markups being used properly, things like image considerations, file size considerations, when we want to be using web content versus documents, and how to ultimately manage multimedia like videos and photos. We'll also cover off how users tend to interact with information on the web, and how users will do more scanning and jumping around on a page than reading paragraph by paragraph. Users interact with web content a lot differently than they do with physical printed documents. So we want to make sure that authors are aware of all of these tendencies and know the best practices for making sure that users are given content that they're expecting and in a consumable format. After that, we'll cover off the editorial process. So it's great to have a whole team of authors assembled, ready to start writing, and even maybe getting into crafting their pages. But we need to make sure that we understand what the process is for getting that content from draft to approved. So the editorial process covers off writing, reviewing, and approval. And this needs to exist in a really explicit format with everyone understanding the steps involved. Otherwise, you'll just end up with a bunch of content everywhere and you'll be corralling for days. So we help the team get clear about roles and responsibility. Who's a writer? Who's reviewing content for tone and message? Who's responsible for sourcing images and other assets? This way, everyone understands what's expected of them. Once you get into the content writing process, we like to manage the editorial process by having daily or weekly stand-ups so that we can check in with everyone involved, see how they're doing. What have you completed since the last check-in? What roadblocks do you have that's preventing you from meeting any deadlines or commitments? And are there any questions that you have or any help that you need? And this quick check-in with the group, it can last, depending how large the group is, 15 minutes to 30 minutes, will really help raise any issues that they might be facing and quickly deal with them either in the meeting or afterwards so that your content production team is able to continue to push forward. So once team members are clear on roles, responsibilities, and the target writing style, they unlock the authoring badge, 2 of our 3 competencies. So the last competency that we cover off with our content team is reviewing the content management system. So at some point, the content needs to get from where we're storing it in the creation process, so maybe in a system like Gather Content, and get it into the live system. So teams need to be trained on the platform changes and the new functionality being leveraged. So the first thing we'll do within this competency is content management system training. And this really focuses not on becoming an expert in the use of the CMS, but really around what components does the content team need to understand to manage the content that they've created. So how do they use the pieces of the system to achieve their content goals and ultimately their organizational objectives? Don't focus on everything, just focus on what they need to know. After that, we'll cover off the authoring guide. The authoring guide demonstrates how to use the building blocks of the design system. Think atomic design here, to compose the layouts needed to integrate the content with the design. So it's not just writing down content and having it appear on the page, but there's lots of technical pieces that have been built to help the authors create more rich experiences within their web pages. And we want to make sure that they understand what all those building blocks are and how they can use them and configure them. Next, we'll create an HTML style guide. The HTML style guide helps authors finesse the content and fine-tune the presentation of their message. So the authoring guide in a training session will usually print out in a tabloid-size, full-color, illustrated guide with tips and tricks. And the HTML style guide will actually be created within the production system itself. And this allows authors to be able to go in and look at example pages that have been created and look at the HTML look at the HTML itself so that they can copy paste anything that's relevant into the pages that they're going to be crafting within the system itself. So the authoring guide we tend to print out as more of a physical artifact, and the HTML style guide will keep digital, because the ability to go in and see exactly how a great page has been constructed and all of the pieces and the configurations and the HTML that are contributing to that is really valuable for the content team to be able to then leverage that work that's already been done and embed those same HTML snippets, configuration changes, etc. into their pages. So really the HTML style guide, the authoring guide, and the content style guide form the content author's Bible. And the CMS training helps just bring this all together. The last thing that we'll cover off in the CMS component is any migration support that may need to happen. So migration is usually a part of an implementation project. Unless you're really starting from scratch and rewriting every single stitch of content, you're going to have to move something from an old system over. So this can be done in an automated way or in a manual way. Automated migration works well for moving large document repositories or news archive, like a news archive from one system to another. But if there's any tweaking that needs to happen along the way before old content gets into the new system, a manual approach is usually the preferred approach. After the migration support approach has been decided, last comes CMS configuration. So this is going in and setting up the CMS in exactly the way it needs to be to meet the content requirements. So this might be things like configuring search, configuring web parts, configuring the pages and the friendly URLs. So whatever needs to happen to allow the content team to go in and start actually migrating their approved content into the production system. So trained and tools in hand, our team unlocks the CMS competency badge. So these are our 3 key competencies that we work with every content team to develop. Information architecture, so the building blocks and the why, the authoring, the how, and then the content management system, the what. So the competencies that we've just built really ultimately form a bridge over the chasm. So strong, competent team members means a strong bridge and a greater chance of crossing the chasm unscathed. So at this juncture, sometimes the content team will journey across the bridge on their own, as rickety or strong as it may be, and the BA and I might stay on the other side. They might go back to just supporting the portal implementation or move on to something else. Ideally, though, if a team really wants to be set up for success, we'd like to see the BA and I be involved in the chasm crossing to help the team with any stumbling blocks they may have as they move all of their content from a system like Gather Content into the production system itself and getting ready for go live. Once we've all gathered on the other end of the chasm, we muster and we deliver. So content delivery is an exciting, exhausting, and key part of a successful implementation for any type of portal, intranet, website, or extranet. And as euphoric as you may feel at that moment of go live, we need to consider what comes next. What happens after the delivery of a great website? Because you can't just create content once and never think about it again. It needs to be something that's continually managed and looked at and taken care of to ensure that the content continues to evolve as the organization's objectives evolve and as the customer experience is required to evolve. So the sustainment components that we need to be thinking about, first off, are content teams and committees. So who's continuing after go live? The team that was assembled to author the content for successful implementation, are they the ones that are going to continue to manage and update and write content moving forward? Or is it a smaller team that's going to be managing this ultimately? And what committees need to be involved? Are there different approval processes required in a post-go live world as compared to the project leading up to go live? And what falls along with committees is governance. So what is the process for making changes to the content itself, or to things like the overall information architecture of the site, changes to the sitemap, or changes to templates and metadata, changes to the style guide, and maybe even changes to the authoring guide or the technical components of the production system? How are we managing all of that? And also how are we ensuring that the changes that are being requested or made are continuing to support the business objectives and the team's objectives? And lastly is making sure that the content lifecycle process has been kicked off. So it's great, it's a finished website, it's beautiful, the pages look amazing, but how do we ensure that what comes next is done in a consistent format and doesn't fall by the wayside? How often are we reviewing content? Is it automatically done? What is the process when we want to make changes or retire content? And who's responsible for this component? So the content lifecycle is really key to make sure that we don't have stale content and that people keep coming back and back to the pages we've created because they're relevant and useful and engaging. So these are the key components that you need to think about around content sustainment, and they need to really be considered hopefully even before you've gone live with the production system, so that as soon as the go live date arrives, you're ready for day one afterwards with some of these structures and systems in place to support all of the hard work and effort that's gone into creating a great portal. So that's really our view of what you need to do to set a content team up for success to cross the killer content chasm. And as I said earlier, we do this all the time with content teams at Habanero. So if you have any questions, please reach out. We're happy to help. I can be reached by email. This webinar is going to also be recorded and put on YouTube. And we also have blog posts talking about things like content and a host of other topics around creating and managing great portals. So thank you so much for joining me today.